Hello, friends. Welcome to Akulmach Live. I'm your host, CK. And, are you excited about elections? And how do you conduct, how do you participate in the election? Do you actually go out and stand in the queue to cast your vote? Or would you like to basically watch, because it's facing the elements and facing the rain, heat, sun, also waiting for long in the long queues while going for casting the vote. However, this is the most important activity that you can indulge in, and therefore it is very important to cast your vote. All right, but today we are discussing about how to make your effort lot easier, and you can use the mobile device like this one to cast your vote without having to step out. But it's logical, we don't get to cast vote using mobile devices, and why we do not. In order to understand this dilemma, let's discuss this in detail, and let's discuss what is happening this year, which is 2024. Well, if you are anywhere in the world today living in a democracy, you would realize that 2024 will always be remembered as the year of the election. Why? Because this has been a very important year where most of the large democracies are going through elections. Either they have finished the elections or they are still having the elections. Like, for example, US, they are still having the elections, which is like in next 1 week they will undergo the presidential election, which is a very important. US is the oldest democracy, as we say. India has actually finished their general election in the month of April, May, and it was the largest election ever held by any standards. However, India being a large country, there are several states, so we have seen couple of states going through the election. So, if you look at overall 2024 as a year, has lot of elections across the world. But would you like to know how many countries are going through this election in 2024? Friends, in addition to the major countries like India and US who are having elections in 2024, in fact, India election just got over, but India is a large country. There are several states, so some state elections are coming up, but there are other continents where there are major elections, general elections to select the next government are happening. And if you look at the list, it's very elaborate. If you look at Africa, there are several countries in Africa which are going to have elections or already finished election in 2024. Some of these countries are Mozambique, South Africa, Rwanda, Senegal, Somaliland, Togo, Tunisia. There are several other countries. Almost more than 50% of Africa will decide the fate of their government. Now let's move on to Americas. It's not only US, but Brazil, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Panama, and Uruguay, Venezuela. All these countries will be selecting the new government in 2024. Let's move on to Asia. We have Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Cambodia, Indonesia, Iran, Jordan, Mongolia, and of course India is also part of the list. India has just finished the general election. They have chosen a new government, but then there are 4 more elections at the state level are coming up within 2024, and these states in India are quite populous. Let's look at Europe. EU elections are going on. EU elections will be held in 2024. Then there are other local elections like Belarus, Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Finland, Germany, Hungary, Iceland. There are so many countries in Europe, and almost all of them are going to have elections or already finished elections in 2024. And then how can we forget about the Oceania? So Australia will be going through the election. But in addition to Australia, there are Solomon Islands and Kiribati. So it's a major year where almost 60% of the population of the world is voting the new government. So now we have established that 2024 is a very, very important year for the humanity which is living in the democratic world. We are not talking about one or two here and there small countries which are dictatorship and there are no elections held in those countries. However, this is an important year, and as I said, 2024 will always be an important year for next 100 years because the future of the countries will be decided. Let's move on to the next point, and why we cannot use the mobile device like this one to cast our vote, because I do everything on my mobile device. I actually have the KYC which is established. I do banking, and banking transactions are one of the most secure transactions in the world with high encryption. And they say that the encryption cannot be broken in 1,000 years and so on. So when we can do all kinds of stuff using mobile device, but the government of the day do not allow voting to happen through the mobile device or remotely. You have to go to the polling booth and cast your vote. Why it is like that? Simply because you know there is a basic difference between voting and any other application. Because moment you start doing transactions, moment you submit your transaction, it becomes public. Well, you don't think about it, but you can see your transactions, and so is the bank. Let us understand more in detail about this. Friends, imagine a situation when the data of the voters or the voting pattern is known to certain people, or probably it is not secret. Imagine what kind of things could unleash if this data is exposed. Therefore, voting data has to be kept absolutely secret, not only from you, but from anyone. Nobody should be able to dig into this data and identify your voting pattern, or your locality, your neighborhood voting pattern, how you have voted, etc. This has to be kept secret, and that is the biggest requirement for any voting system across the world. So friends, banking is different because banking, the secrecy of the transaction is not to be kept, because at any time you can see what transactions you have done, even though the transaction is completely secure, but the information which is stored in the transaction can be exposed to you, to your relative, to the banker, or to the authorities. It is an open fact. Voting has to be kept secret at all times. Once you have casted the vote, nobody should be able to see what you have done until the time it is counted, and even after that it has to be kept secret. That is the whole point of running an election, and therefore the banking system is not similar to voting system, and that is the reason why the online voting has not been introduced, even though the countries which are using online methods are very technologically very advanced. Still, most of the large democracies do not see mobile based voting system. Let's move to the next point. So what is stopping voting to happen on a mobile device or a remote? First thing is the establishing credentials of the voter. You see, what happens is that you have a physical presence. You have a name, you have an address, you have a mobile phone, you have a number, you have a national ID, etc. So that is a physical presence. So you can be identified using your know your customer KYC basically, and people can identify you physically. But when you transition your personality, yourself into digital world, then how do you basically establish that the digital presence is same as your physical presence? How do you ensure that these are mapped 1:1? Because right now that is not happening. Therefore, your credentials in the digital world are different, and in the physical world are different, and that is a one big issue of the voters, because the voter credentials cannot be proven. Now there are ways and means of doing that. Let's understand this in detail. Well, in the year 2024, there are a lot of humanity which is going to vote the future of their governance in their respective countries or state. However, when we talk about credentials, many countries do not have proven credentials of the voters. A large country like India has issued voter IDs, and it has been there for last 30 years. Imagine country like India can think of this aspect of voting, a fair and fair election voting, and therefore each voter carries a voter ID. However, in even in the advanced countries like US, there is no concept of proving the voter credential, and that is a big gap today. And how do you basically start the creating a voter credential database? Well, many countries have the national IDs. That could be the starting point, but then the willingness of the politician is questionable. Many countries do not like to proceed that path where the credentials of the voters can be proven. So, friends, there are legal systems running in all democracy, and the biggest legal rights given to the citizens in any country is right to freedom, right to privacy, right to speech. These are certain fundamental rights given to all democratic countries. So, if you actually start, providing the number and everything is linked to that number, which is like a voter ID, etc., or national ID, then your identity can be made public, and which is sort of not right for a democracy, because if somebody don't want to share his credential with anyone, even with the government, then he should be allowed to do so, right? So the choice is given to the citizens. That means if they want to create online credentials, they have to opt in, and that much facility people have to be provided. However, when it comes to voting, it is absolutely important to have people being identified, whether physically or in the digital world. So the right to freedom, right to speech, right to privacy, and maintaining credentials for the voting system are kind of poles apart. And that is a big reason. How do you establish that so many voters are the genuine voters and they have voted for a certain party? Let's move on to the next point, which is preventing authorities or governments of various democratic countries to start voting using the mobile devices. And that is the ability of certain high power individual to do coercion. You can actually put pressure on certain bunch of people, and you can say that you have to vote in this manner. And when it is physically done, and since it is a secret ballot, you have to go prove your credentials physically to the voting officer, and then when you cast your vote, nobody is actually looking at you. You can do whatever you want. The freedom is given to you. Nobody will know whom you have voted. However, if it is in the digital world, and suppose you start voting, and you can actually verify your credentials using your face recognition or biometrics, but then you can hand over this mobile phone to somebody else under coercion, that somebody can actually vote on your behalf. So how do you ensure this thing not to happen? So that is one example. There are several other examples of coercions. So a pressure can be applied using which vote can be casted. However, if this is done, this is not the secret ballot. Well, you all agree when I say that the politicians, whichever country they are live in, whichever continent they are in, they are some of the most powerful people that you will encounter. And they have mass appeal, and they have the ability to change your future as well as your present. So imagine if the elections are swing in certain favor, and by basically putting some sort of pressure or coercion on certain people, it can actually change the fate of the country or group of people. So by any chance, election commission in any country, their objective is to make sure that the election is absolutely fair and transparent, and therefore there is no possibility of any coercion on certain individual or group of people. Therefore, in all the election commission across the world, this is the most important aspect that they look at, how they can avoid any sort of coercion techniques which is employed by anyone. In fact, if there are coercion, if the case is proven that there was some coercion, the elections are nullified and re-elections are held. So because of the coercion, because of the digital media, the lack of security, even though you provide 100% security, but it is not 100%. The authorities do not feel very confident to launch online method of voting. Let's look at the other issue that we have, and that is the interference, either physical interference or virus-based or a malware-based interference in any country's election. You can actually create an espionage situation using this software today, where one country can influence the election of another country. There are several instances where there are allegations being put by politicians and other parties that some country is interfering in this country's election process, and therefore this is something which can happen in an online method of voting. And you can actually say that, okay, now you can you don't like your vote, you can change, or you can be influenced by a software where you are forced to vote in certain pattern, and this influence can happen through social media, through some sort of behavioral pattern, manipulation, etc. Or the malware directly can change the data. You have voted online, but then somebody can hack into the database and can change your vote. uh, so all of these possibilities are there. It is not a foolproof 100% foolproof system, because of which authorities think that this is something which cannot be provided as an online. People will be asked to visit the polling booth, and they will be asked to cast the vote after verifying their identities, and the voting has to be done in a very secretive manner, and the vote has to be kept secret also. So since we do not have solution 100% foolproof solution for all these issues, that is why we are not allowed to vote in an online manner, even though we are doing everything else from our mobile, but voting is still in the physical world. All right. And the last point is the most important point, and that is the denial of services. You see, what happens is that there are different kinds of malware or viruses. They can either influence the voter, they can actually hack into the database, or they can make the server slow down or crash. In such an event, when a server, the voting server, crashes or not available, that means the denial of service can be implemented by some mischievous element or a foreign enemy country. And if there is a voting pattern which is slowed, that itself will also defeat the purpose of voting, because 100% of the people will not be able to cast the vote in that voting time frame. So you can actually slow down the voting, or you can completely crash the overload the server, and the server can crash, and the voting in that particular pocket or constituency cannot go on. And that is why the denial of service attack is very, very serious. The election commission actually look at all of these issues that I have discussed today very, very seriously, and until unless there are foolproof solutions available for your establishing the voter credential, establishing that the voter cannot be coerced into voting in certain manner, the attack or system-based attack using viruses and malware can be 100% avoided, and the denial of service attacks. These are the four main reasons because of which you are not able to vote using your mobile device, while anything else you do, it's running, even including banking is running on your mobile. So friends, have I missed out on any other point? If I have, I will be more than happy to hear from you, or if you have any opinion, please do not hesitate to send it across. Thanks for watching me live. and I will catch you again in the next